Thank you, Chairman King, members of the committee. I'm happy to lay out House Bill 1743, the Protect Texas Land Act. There are a number of, call them China land bills, that are circulating in the legislature in various committees. Obviously, you're probably aware of Representative Hefner's bill that came through his own committee. This bill is another one of those. Let me explain to you the origin. So the Protect Texas Land Act was drafted last fall. My instructions to the Ledge Council were, please get me a Texas analog to Act 636 that was passed in Arkansas and signed into law by Governor Sarah Huckabee Sanders. You guys may be aware that Arkansas has already passed a bill banning, I'll call it hostile foreign ownership of real estate in their state, and it was signed into law. At that point in time, when it was passed into law, the Biden administration was still in charge, and they filed a lawsuit against Arkansas and obtained obtained an injunction enjoining that law from enforcement. The reason being federal preemption. Well, we're now outside of probably a federal preemption environment based on the change in leadership nationally, and I think this is the right time for Texas to bring a similar law to the forefront. So, as I said, there are a number of bills filed this session addressing this very important issue. You're likely aware of Chairman Hefner's bill. I want to give you some reasons to consider this one. There are some slight differences to the approach that's offered here and was offered through Arkansas. The first one is we've got, let's start with the similarities between this bill and Chairman Hefner's bill. We've got very similar definitions of the classes of person for whom real estate ownership is banned. We're generally talking about non-citizens of the United States. We're talking about foreign entities that may or may not have a presence in the United States, and entities that are under the control or the proxies of a hostile government. So those aspects of my bill and Chairman Hefner's bill are very similar. We also have very similar investigative and divestiture mechanisms through the Office of the Attorney General. So for those of you who may not have spent as much time fiddling with this as I have, the mechanism for divestiture of land, meaning causing the Attorney General's office to seek a receiver or seek appointment of a receiver and then sell the real estate that is owned by someone who shouldn't have it, is very similar from bill to bill. The mechanism of investigation by the Office of the Attorney General is also very similar. The Attorney General is empowered to go out and investigate and identify real estate ownership by, we'll call it affiliates or representatives of China, Iran, Russia, North Korea, et cetera, and then determine whether that real estate ownership is in compliance with the Act. There are some significant differences, though, in this bill and Chairman Hefner's bill, and I want to just run those off. The first significant difference is that in this bill, it imposes an active reporting requirement on the part of the owner of the real estate. It imposes also a criminal offense for intentionally or knowingly making a false statement. So I want you to imagine with me that you have a Chinese LLC that is predominantly controlled by the government. You guys, I'm sure you've heard from a group called State Armor. They were testifying earlier this morning. Oftentimes, the ownership of foreign entities, whether they're Chinese or Russian, Iranian, it's very opaque. It's difficult to determine the state's role in managing those entities. And so it is an affirmative obligation on the part of the acquirer of the real estate to report to the state that ownership within a certain period of time after acquiring it. So we've got in this bill an active reporting requirement requiring the owner of the real estate to report it to the state, and if you lie about it or you intentionally don't report, there's a criminal offense. We actually make it a state jail felony in the bill. The second component of this bill that's a little bit different, I think Representative Darby will probably be interested in this, is there is what I'll call a title savings clause inside of this bill. So in other words, if there's a concern that if you have someone who's not supposed to own the real estate, a state actor or a state-sponsored entity, that there are going to be ruptures in the chain of title, or there are potential claims against a title company for allowing that property to transfer from a good owner to a bad owner. There's a savings clause in here that essentially captures that problem, says this is not going to affect the chain of title of the real estate. The third portion that's a little bit different is the creation of an Office of Intelligence with the Office of the Agriculture Commissioner. So this idea is once again cribbed from the state of Arkansas. One of the problems that I think we will see in enforcement is if we pass a bill preventing China, Iran, Russia, North Korea from owning real estate in this state, it ultimately has to be someone in the government's job to watch it, monitor it, and determine whether that ownership is wrongful, specifically with regard to agricultural land. I'm sure we're all now well aware of China's acquisition of roughly 30,000 acres in South Texas up against an Air Force base. So creating an Office of Intelligence at the Agriculture Commissioner's office, I think, will give us an opportunity to at least gather that information for purposes of divestiture. Also, and I'll note this, kind of the final difference between this bill and Chairman Hefner's bill is the divestiture mechanism. So there is what I'll call a safe harbor that will allow a party to, if they find out, okay, I own this real estate and I'm no longer allowed to do so, this entity is owned in whole or in part by an affiliate of a hostile government. They have a 2-year period to divest that real estate themselves before the state of Texas has the ability to come in and do it for them. So as we work our way through this, I know that there is some ideological opposition to this idea of divesting Chinese either nationals, representatives, or affiliates of real estate in this state. But I'll just say it's not just China. We are dealing with other foreign entities as well. Russia in particular, in my law practice, I've encountered a lot of money laundering through Russian entities and ownership in both Florida, or in all of Florida, New York, and California. So that the ideological purpose of this bill is to protect Texans and make sure that we preserve our land for the people who should have it. I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have as best I can, and I'll reserve the right to close.
Thank you, Mr. Little.